There's a quiet epidemic spreading through modern life, one we don't talk about nearly enough. It's the weight of desperation, that crushing feeling when life piles up, when uncertainty gnaws at you, when every setback feels like proof that you're falling behind. Maybe you've felt it too, waking up with dread, scrolling through endless comparisons, or lying awake at night wondering how to fix what's broken. Desperation doesn't just steal your peace, it clouds your judgment, narrows your vision, and makes even small challenges feel impossible. But what if I told you there's an ancient philosophy, tested by time and hardship, that holds the keys to breaking free? Stoicism isn't just about gritting your teeth through suffering. It's about rewiring your mind so desperation never takes root in the first place. I remember the first time Stoicism saved me. Years ago, I was trapped in a cycle of stress and self-doubt, convinced that one wrong move would unravel everything. Then I stumbled on a simple Stoic principle: you suffer more in imagination than in reality. That single idea was a lifeline. It didn't magically fix my problems, but it shifted something deeper, my relationship to them. Suddenly, I wasn't a victim of circumstance. I had tools to navigate it. That's the power of Stoicism. It doesn't promise a life without storms, but it teaches you how to build an unshakable inner harbor. And today, we're diving into 30 of its most transformative lessons that have guided emperors, artists, and everyday people through chaos for thousands of years. This isn't just philosophy, it's a survival manual for the modern world. Over the next 30 lessons, you'll discover how to dismantle desperation piece by piece, how to silence the noise of external validation, how to find strength in adversity, and how to cultivate a calm so deep that even life's toughest blows can't shake you. These aren't abstract ideas, they're practical, battle-tested strategies you can start using today. Whether you're facing financial strain, heartbreak, or the relentless pressure to keep up, Stoicism offers something rare, a way to reclaim control without denying reality. So if you're ready to trade anxiety for agency and fear for focus, you're in the right place. Let's begin. The first and most foundational lesson of Stoicism is this: focus only on what you can control. Epictetus, one of the great Stoic teachers, framed it as the dichotomy of control, the idea that everything in life falls into one of two categories: things that are within your power and things that are not. Your thoughts, your actions, your reactions, those belong to you. The weather, other people's opinions, traffic jams, job rejections, those don't. Sounds simple, right? But here's the catch. Most of us spend our days drowning in the second category, exhausting ourselves over things we can't change. Take rush hour traffic, for example. When you're stuck in gridlock, honking your horn or cursing at the cars ahead won't make them move. That's energy wasted on something entirely outside your control. But your response, whether you simmer in frustration or use the time to listen to an audiobook, whether you let it ruin your morning or shrug it off, that's entirely up to you. The same applies to bigger challenges like losing a job or facing criticism. You can't force an employer to hire you or control what others say about you. But you can refine your skills, send out another application, or choose to see feedback as fuel for growth rather than a personal attack. The tragedy is how often we get this backward. We obsess over outcomes we can't guarantee: whether a date will like us, whether a deal will close, while neglecting the one thing we can shape: our own preparation and mindset. Stoicism flips the script. It asks, why pour your energy into the uncontrollable when you could invest it where it actually matters? Picture two people facing the same setback. One rages against circumstances, the other adapts and moves forward. That's the difference between desperation and agency. This isn't about passivity. Stoics weren't advocating resignation. They were teaching radical responsibility. When you stop fighting reality, when you accept that some doors will close, some people will disappoint, some plans will fail, you free up immense mental space. Suddenly, you're no longer at the mercy of external events. You start directing your effort where it counts, your choices, your efforts, your attitude. That shift alone can lift the weight of desperation, because real power isn't about controlling life. It's about mastering how you meet it. Amor Fati, the Latin phrase meaning love of fate, isn't just about accepting what happens to you. It's about embracing it, finding the hidden value in every setback, and even learning to welcome adversity as a teacher. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor whose private journal became a cornerstone of Stoic wisdom, wrote extensively about this mindset. In one entry, he scribbled a reminder to himself: the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Think about that for a moment. The very obstacles we resent, the setbacks we dread, they aren't just inconveniences. They're opportunities in disguise. Take Marcus's own life. As emperor, he faced invasions, plagues, and betrayals, yet his writings reveal a man who saw these challenges as raw material for growth. When barbarian tribes threatened Rome's borders, he didn't despair. He used the crisis to hone his leadership. When political rivals undermined him, he treated their hostility as a chance to practice patience. Even his chronic health problems became a daily exercise in endurance. What made him extraordinary wasn't the absence of suffering, but his refusal to see suffering as meaningless. Centuries later, Friedrich Nietzsche, a philosopher who rarely agreed with anyone, echoed this idea in his own provocative way. He called Amor Fati his formula for greatness and wrote, "My formula for human greatness is to want nothing to be different, not forward, not backward, not in all eternity." Notice the radical nature of that statement, not just enduring fate, but loving it, not wishing for a single moment of your life to be rewritten. How does this dismantle desperation? Because desperation thrives on resistance. When we fight reality, when we rage against a job loss, a breakup, or a missed opportunity, we drain ourselves in a battle we can't win. Amor Fati offers a different path. Imagine two artists. One gets rejected from a gallery and spirals into self-doubt, while the other uses the rejection to refine their technique. Or two entrepreneurs. One sees a failed product as proof they're doomed. The other mines the failure for lessons that lead to their next breakthrough. The difference isn't luck or talent, it's the willingness to engage with life as it is, not as you wish it were. This isn't blind optimism. Stoicism doesn't ask you to pretend hardship feels good. It asks you to recognize that hardship does something good if you let it. The broken bone that teaches patience, the layoff that pushes you toward a better career. The heartbreak that reveals your own resilience. When you start viewing setbacks as fuel, desperation loses its grip. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What is this preparing me for?" That shift doesn't just ease suffering, it transforms it into strength. Marcus Aurelius didn't journal about loving fate because his life was easy. He did it because his life was hard, and that's the point. Amor Fati isn't for the untroubled, it's for those who choose to find meaning in the struggle. When you stop resisting reality and start collaborating with it, desperation has nowhere to land. The obstacle isn't just something to overcome, it's the very thing that shapes you into someone who can. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher who advised emperors and weathered political storms, had a counterintuitive habit that might sound unsettling at first. He regularly imagined the worst that could happen. Not out of pessimism, but as a form of mental armor. He called it premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. At first glance, it seems grim, visualizing job loss, illness, even the death of loved ones. But here's the paradox: by consciously facing what we fear, we drain it of power. Anxiety thrives in the shadows of the unexamined. When you drag those fears into the light and walk through them step by step, something remarkable happens. You realize you'd survive. More than survive, you'd adapt. Consider a modern example: financial instability. Close your eyes and imagine the worst-case scenario. Your savings wiped out, debts piling up, no job prospects in sight. Your chest tightens. Right now, pause. Ask yourself, what would I actually do? You'd cut unnecessary expenses, sell what you don't need, take any available work to stay afloat. You'd reach out to your network, explore side hustles, maybe even move in with family temporarily. The crisis wouldn't vanish, but you'd navigate it. That's the revelation. The worst-case scenario isn't the end. It's a problem with solutions. And once you've mentally rehearsed those solutions, the unknown loses its fangs. This practice isn't about manifesting disaster. It's about vaccinating yourself against desperation. Ancient Stoics knew what modern psychology confirms: uncertainty is far more agonizing than reality. Studies show that patients awaiting medical results suffer more anxiety than those who receive bad news. Why? Because the human mind can't brace against vague threats. Premeditatio malorum replaces that vagueness with clarity. When Seneca pictured exile, poverty, or betrayal, he wasn't wallowing, he was rehearsing resilience. What's the worst that can happen becomes a practical question, not a spiral into dread. Imagine two entrepreneurs before a big pitch. One obsesses over every possible mistake, haunted by visions of humiliation. The other has already visualized the project failing and mentally mapped their next steps, refining the idea, seeking alternate investors, learning from feedback. Who walks into that room with more confidence? The one who's already faced the specter of failure and realized it's not fatal. This is the Stoic secret. By embracing the possibility of loss, you become impervious to desperation. You don't just tolerate adversity, you outthink it. Seneca wrote letters from exile describing the beauty of solitude. He lost his fortune and found freedom in simplicity. Every worst case he'd imagined became a chance to test his principles, and every time he discovered the same truth: we are far more adaptable than we think. So tonight, try this exercise. Pick one fear: career stagnation, a relationship ending, a health scare, and walk through it step by step, not as a victim but as a problem solver. List the practical actions you'd take, the support you'd lean on, the lessons you'd gather. When you do, you're not preparing for disaster, you're dismantling its power over you. Because the real tragedy isn't hardship, it's letting the fear of hardship steal your present peace. Stoicism doesn't promise a life without storms, but it teaches you how to stand unshaken in the rain. Marcus Aurelius never expected an easy reign, but even he couldn't have anticipated the relentless barrage of crises that tested his Stoic principles. During his time as emperor, Rome faced waves of barbarian invasions, a devastating plague, and political betrayals, yet his private journals reveal a man who didn't just endure these challenges, but mined them for wisdom. Take the Marcomannic Wars. When Germanic tribes breached the empire's borders, Marcus didn't wallow in frustration. Instead, he saw the conflict as a forge for resilience. Stationed in the freezing Danube frontier, he wrote by candlelight, refining his philosophy amid the chaos. The impediment to action advances action, he reminded himself. Those words weren't abstract, they were battle-tested. Every logistical failure became a lesson in adaptability. Every betrayal trained him in discernment. The war wasn't just a threat to Rome, it was his classroom. Centuries later, author Ryan Holiday would distill this mindset into 3 words: the obstacle is the way. His book's title came from an unexpected place, a translation error. While researching, Holiday stumbled on a line from Marcus Aurelius that had been mistranslated for years. The original Greek didn't say, "the obstacle becomes the way." It was far more active. The obstacle advances the way. That subtle shift captures the essence of Stoic practice. Obstacles aren't passive roadblocks, they're catalysts that propel us forward if we engage them correctly. Holiday's own career embodies this. When his first book was rejected by publishers, he turned to self-publishing, building an audience that eventually made him a bestseller. The rejection wasn't a dead end, it was the detour he needed. Now apply this to modern struggles. Losing a job feels like a collapse until you realize it's a forced redirection. Maybe that layoff pushes you toward a passion project or reveals an industry that aligns with your values. Relationships end in heartbreak, but that pain often clears space for deeper connections or self-discovery. The key lies in reframing. A musician whose hand injury ends their performing career might discover a gift for teaching or composing. A shattered dream of medical school could lead to unexpected fulfillment in medical advocacy or research. The barrier isn't denying your goal, it's rerouting you toward a version of it you couldn't yet see. This isn't about toxic positivity. Stoicism doesn't pretend setbacks don't hurt. It asks you to separate the event from your interpretation of it. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed," he wasn't dismissing pain. He was highlighting a radical truth: suffering is optional. Two people lose the same job, one spirals into self-blame, the other audits their skills and pivots. The event is identical, the outcomes are worlds apart. So next time you hit an obstacle, ask Stoicism's defining question: how can this serve me, not as wishful thinking but as practical strategy? The client who rejected you might have revealed a gap in your approach. The failed project could highlight a strength you've undervalued. Even grief, when fully faced, carves out a capacity for compassion you'll carry forward. The obstacle isn't just something to overcome, it's the chisel that shapes who you become. Marcus didn't win every battle, but he understood the deeper victory. No external force could dictate his inner progress. That's the alchemy of Stoicism, turning leaden setbacks into golden growth. The Romans kept death close, not as a morbid obsession, but as a compass. Their generals, returning from victorious campaigns, rode through streets lined with cheering crowds, but behind them stood a slave whispering in their ear, "Memento Mori, remember you must die." This wasn't meant to dampen celebration, but to anchor it in truth. The Stoics took this further, turning mortality into a daily practice. Seneca wrote letters urging his friends to live each day as if it were their last, not with frantic hedonism, but with clear-eyed intention. "Let us prepare our minds as if we'd come to the very end of life," he advised. "Let us postpone nothing." Modern culture does the opposite. We sanitize death, hide it behind hospital curtains and euphemisms. We scroll through endless streams of content, chasing distractions that make us feel immortal. But avoidance comes at a cost. When we refuse to acknowledge life's brevity, we tolerate mediocrity. We stay in jobs that drain us, relationships that diminish us, postponing joy for a hypothetical future. Stoicism flips this script. By staring death in the face, you're forced to ask, if this were my last year, would I spend it this way? That question isn't depressing, it's liberating. It strips away desperation's illusions, revealing what truly matters. Consider the imaginal exercises, a Stoic ritual where you'd mentally rehearse losing everything, your status, possessions, even loved ones. At first, it feels like torture, but something shifts when you sit with it. You start noticing the cracks in your facades, the accolades that won't comfort you on your deathbed, the grudges too petty to carry to the grave. Mortality awareness isn't about fear, it's about focus. The entrepreneur hustling for vanity metrics pauses when death whispers in her ear, "Is this venture meaningful or just busy work?" The artist paralyzed by perfectionism creates freely when reminded, you don't have forever. History's most vibrant figures understood this. Steve Jobs kept death on his shoulder like a co-founder. In his famous Stanford speech, he credited his cancer diagnosis with sharpening his priorities. "Remembering that I'll be dead soon is the most important tool I've ever encountered to help me make the big choices in life." The Japanese practice of yujin, finding beauty in life's transience, echoes Stoicism. Cherry blossoms are prized precisely because they fade. Here's the paradox: embracing mortality doesn't shrink your life, it expands it. When you stop pretending you have unlimited time, you stop wasting it. You say no to empty obligations and yes to deep conversations. You trade desperate striving for deliberate action. The Roman general knew his triumphs were temporary, so he savored them without clinging. The Stoic philosopher knew each lecture might be his last, so he spoke with unflinching honesty. This lesson isn't about preparing to die, it's about learning to live. Next time you feel trapped by desperation, ask death's clarifying question: if this were my final act, would it be worthy? The answer will either sharpen your resolve or reveal a path you've been too afraid to take. Mortality isn't the enemy, forgetting it is. And in that remembering, you'll find a life lived, not deferred. Marcus Aurelius never intended for his private journal to become one of history's most influential books. He wrote meditations not for publication, but as personal self-therapy, a series of brutal, beautiful conversations with himself. That's why it still resonates 2,000 years later. The emperor wasn't crafting eloquent philosophy, he was doing the gritty work of untangling his own mind. And that's the power of Stoic journaling. It's not about documenting your day, but dismantling your mental clutter. Modern research backs this up. Studies from the University of Rochester show expressive writing reduces stress hormones, while Harvard researchers found daily journaling strengthens emotional processing. But here's what makes Stoic journaling different. It's not just venting. It's structured self-interrogation designed to rewire desperation into clarity. Start with this 5-step template modeled after Marcus's own practice. First, the morning preparation. Before checking your phone or diving into tasks, ask what challenges might arise today. Not to dread them, but to mentally rehearse handling them with wisdom. Marcus often began entries by listing virtues he wanted to embody: patience with difficult colleagues, courage in tough conversations. This primes your brain to meet obstacles intentionally. Second, gratitude mapping. The Stoics weren't just about enduring hardship, they actively cultivated appreciation. Write 3 specific things you already have: clean water, a friend's text, sunlight through your window. Neuroscience reveals this simple act shifts your brain from scarcity to abundance mode. Come evening, shift to the audit. Seneca called this his daily court, a ruthless but compassionate review. Ask, where did I act aligned with my values? Where did I slip, not to self-flagellate but to course correct? Marcus dissected his own outbursts and distractions with surgical honesty, then prescribed himself better responses. Step 4. Obstacle reframing. Recall one difficulty from your day and apply Amor Fati. How could this serve you? Maybe the delayed flight gave you unexpected reading time. The argument revealed a boundary you need to set. Finally, Memento Mori. Reflect on one moment today you'd want to remember if it were your last. Not the big wins, but the fleeting details. Your child's laughter, the taste of your coffee, the way light fell across your desk. This isn't morbid, it's alchemy, transforming ordinary moments into gold. Modern psychology confirms what the Stoics knew: writing creates distance from chaotic emotions. UCLA research shows putting feelings into words reduces amygdala activity, literally calming your fight or flight response. But Stoic journaling goes further. When Marcus wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events," he wasn't just stating a fact. He was reinforcing a neural pathway every time his pen hit the page. Your journal becomes a gym for your mindset, where you train resilience rep by rep. Try this tonight. Before bed, write one sentence answering, "What's one thing I'm clinging to that's beyond my control?" Then release it onto the page. That's the magic of the Stoic journal. It's where desperation goes to die, one honest line at a time. Epictetus had a startling way of illustrating how casually we surrender our peace. Picture this: you're standing in the marketplace and a stranger walks up, hands you their luggage and says, "Hold this." You'd refuse, right? Yet every day we do something far more reckless. We hand complete strangers our minds. Not literal strangers, but anyone whose opinion we treat as truth without question. The co-worker's offhand critique that ruins your week. The Instagram post that makes you feel inadequate, the relative who declares your life choices wrong. The Stoics called these externals, things outside our reasoned choice. And here's the radical flip. Just as you wouldn't let a passerby dictate what you carry in your arms, why let them dictate what you carry in your thoughts? Social media amplifies this ancient trap. You scroll past someone's highlight reel, vacations, promotions, perfect relationships, and suddenly your own life feels lacking. But here's what Epictetus would ask: did you consent to this comparison? That influencer didn't force their curated images into your mind, you handed them the keys. The same applies to real-life interactions. When someone says, "You'll never succeed at that," they're offering an opinion, not a prophecy. Stoicism teaches you to catch these mental handoffs before they land. Imagine holding up a mental return to sender stamp. "Thanks for sharing," you might say internally, "but this isn't mine to carry." This isn't about dismissing all feedback. Wisdom comes from discernment, not defiance. The key is the locus of evaluation, a psychological term that aligns perfectly with Stoic thought. Ask yourself, is this opinion coming from someone who shares my values? Does it help me grow or just shrink my confidence? A violin maker doesn't seek advice from a dentist. She consents to critique from fellow craftsmen. Likewise, if you're building a quiet, purposeful life, why let a chaos-loving acquaintance define your pace? Practical tools help cement this shift. First, the double filter, a Stoic twist on Socrates' 3 sieves. Before internalizing any opinion, run it through 2 questions. Is this within my control? If not, release it. Does this align with my purpose? If not, discard it. Next, create boundary mantras, short scripts to disarm external judgments. When faced with unsolicited advice, try, "I appreciate your perspective, but my path is different." For social comparison, their chapter isn't my book. These aren't shields against growth, they're sieves separating wheat from chaff. History offers striking examples. Take Zeno, the founder of Stoicism. After losing his fortune in a shipwreck, bystanders pitied him. His response: "Fortune did me a favor. She forced me to start studying philosophy." He didn't absorb their narrative of tragedy, he rewrote it. Or consider modern figures like Frida Kahlo, who transformed others' perceptions of her disability into art that redefined beauty. The common thread isn't stubbornness, it's selective consent. They took only the opinions that served their evolution. The deeper freedom here isn't ignoring others, it's choosing whose voices get a vote in your inner council. Desperation thrives when we outsource our self-worth to random passers-by. But when you guard your mind like a sacred space, granting entry only to what nurtures your growth, you reclaim something priceless, the right to define yourself. That's the ultimate Stoic refusal, to never again hand your peace to a stranger in the marketplace of opinions. Cato the Younger, the Stoic senator who defied Julius Caesar, didn't just preach resilience, he engineered it. Every morning he'd plunge into freezing waters, not because Rome lacked heated baths, but because he refused to let comfort become a crutch. He wore thin robes in winter, walked barefoot over rough terrain, and often skipped meals not as punishment but as training. To modern eyes, this looks like unnecessary hardship, but to a Stoic, voluntary discomfort was the ultimate hack against desperation. It's the mental equivalent of a vaccine. By exposing yourself to small, controlled doses of adversity, you build immunity against life's inevitable shocks. Fast forward 2,000 years and we're living in what author Michael Easter calls the comfort crisis. Thermostats maintain perfect temperatures year-round. Apps deliver hot meals in minutes. Algorithms feed us content that aligns with our existing biases. Convenience isn't just available, it's expected. Yet depression and anxiety rates have skyrocketed. This isn't a coincidence. The human nervous system evolved to face challenges, not avoid them. When we eliminate all friction, we don't eliminate suffering, we just make ourselves more fragile. A study from the University of Colorado found that people who engage in occasional voluntary hardship, like camping without tech or taking cold showers, report higher resilience to daily stressors. The science confirms what Cato knew: comfort without contrast breeds weakness. Here's the twist: voluntary discomfort isn't about self-denial, it's about reclaiming agency. When you choose to fast for a day, you're no longer at the mercy of your hunger. When you take a cold shower, you prove to yourself that temporary discomfort won't break you. Naval officer James Stockdale, whose Stoic principles helped him survive 7 years as a POW in Vietnam, described this as the paradox of discipline. The more you willingly embrace hardship, the freer you become. His torturers controlled his physical conditions, but they couldn't touch his mindset. Ready to test this? Try a 24-hour discomfort challenge. First, ditch your phone for a full day. Notice how often your hand reflexively reaches for it. That's your brain's comfort seeking autopilot at work. Next, swap your warm shower for a cold one. The initial shock triggers a flood of noradrenaline, sharpening focus like nature's espresso. Finally, skip one meal, not to starve yourself, but to rediscover the difference between hunger, a physical signal, and craving, a mental habit. You'll likely notice 2 things. The discomfort is less intense than you feared, and surviving it leaves you oddly energized. The goal isn't to live like an ascetic. It's to break comfort's hypnotic hold. Modern life offers endless buffers against inconvenience, but those buffers can become cages. When you voluntarily step outside them, you reclaim something precious, the knowledge that you're more adaptable than your environment suggests. Cotto didn't take cold baths to prove he was tough. He did it to remind himself that warmth was a gift, not a given. That's the secret weapon of voluntary discomfort. It doesn't just prepare you for hardship, it transforms ordinary comforts into daily luxuries you no longer take for granted. So tonight, as you climb into your temperature-controlled bed, ask yourself, when was the last time you willingly chose discomfort? Not because life forced it on you, but because you knew it would make you stronger. That's the Stoic edge, turning life's inevitable stings into vaccinations against despair. The cold water isn't the point, the choice is. Hercules didn't become a Stoic icon because of his strength, it was his choices that immortalized him. The famous myth of the hero at the crossroads, where he had to choose between vice and virtue, wasn't just a moral tale for the ancients, it was a masterclass in Stoic framing. The goddesses didn't offer him 2 futures, they offered 2 perspectives. Vice promised comfort, pleasure, and easy wins. Virtue warned of struggle, hardship, but ultimate meaning. What makes this story timeless isn't Hercules' selection, but his realization. Life isn't about what happens to you, it's about how you meet it. Every irritation, setback, or temptation isn't just an event, it's an exam. Your patience, resilience, and integrity are being tested, not by some cosmic professor, but by the raw material of existence itself. Think of the last time you faced a frustrating delay, a flight cancellation, a last-minute work demand, a friend's unreliable behavior. Most of us react with irritation, seeing these as interruptions to our real lives. Stoicism flips that script. What if that traffic jam wasn't ruining your day, but revealing it? The delayed flight isn't stealing your time, it's showing you how you handle lost time. The unfair criticism from your boss doesn't expose their flaws, it tests your ability to disentangle ego from growth. Imagine wearing a mental wristband that reads WWHD. What would Hercules do? Not in some grandiose lion-slaying way, but in those quiet moments when virtue whispers and vice shouts. Corporate environments turn this into high-stakes practice. Picture a senior executive who's spent months preparing a merger proposal. At the final board meeting, a rival takes credit for her ideas. The rush of heat, the clenched jaw, that's the first test. Does she publicly humiliate the colleague, trading momentary satisfaction for long-term reputation damage? Or does she channel the Stoic virtue of justice, not passive tolerance, but strategic correction? Later, in private, she might address the theft with HR or reposition herself in future meetings. The Stoic move isn't swallowing the insult, it's refusing to let the insult dictate her dignity. Small daily irritations are the pop quizzes before life's final exams. Your neighbor's barking dog isn't just noise pollution, it's a chance to practice patience. The barrister getting your order wrong isn't incompetence, it's a test of your ability to communicate without contempt. Even social media becomes a training ground. That inflammatory post from a relative isn't just ignorance, it's a multiple-choice question. Engage with grace, scroll past with indifference, or block with quiet finality. Every response writes your character. The brilliance of this framework lies in its alchemy. It transforms victims into students. When you start seeing life as a series of philosophical exams, desperation loses its grip. Failed a test, there's always a retake. Past one, stay humble. The next is already printing. Hercules didn't ace every challenge. He messed up, suffered, and kept choosing. That's the real lesson. Your labors won't involve hydras or golden apples, but deadlines, disagreements, and doubts. And each time you choose virtue over pettiness, patience over rage, purpose over distraction, you're not just solving a problem, you're becoming someone no problem can break. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, left us with a peculiar but profound observation. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. He wasn't giving an anatomy lesson, he was revealing a blueprint for wisdom. In a world drowning in noise, where oversharing is the norm and impulse reigns, the Stoics practiced something radical: restraint of speech, not silence but precision. Every word was measured, not out of timidity, but because they understood language as currency. Spend it carelessly, and you devalue it. Compare that to today's endless streams of hot takes, unfiltered rants, and performative vulnerability. We mistake volume for value, believing that more words equal more meaning. But desperation often hides in the spaces between our sentences, in the complaints we didn't need to voice, the gossip that added nothing, the opinions we expressed before we'd fully formed them. Take modern workplaces as a case study. How many meetings spiral into hours because no one pauses to ask, is this essential? The colleague who dominates discussions with tangential stories, the manager who lectures instead of listens, these aren't just inefficiencies. They're breaches of a Stoic principle. Speech should serve a purpose, either to improve a situation or to clarify truth. When Seneca advised, "Say only what is not worthless," he wasn't advocating blandness. He was urging us to wield words like a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. The difference between a Stoic and a chronic talker isn't verbosity, it's intentionality. One fills silence out of discomfort, the other respects silence as fertile ground for thought. Gossip is where this discipline becomes urgent. Ancient Stoics viewed it as a triple poison. It harms the listener by fueling pettiness, the subject by spreading distortions, and the speaker by eroding integrity. But here's the modern trap: we often disguise gossip as concern. "I'm just worried about Sarah's divorce," slides into dissecting her choices. "Did you hear about the layoffs?" Morphs into speculating who's next. The Stoic antidote, the 3 gates test borrowed from Sufi tradition. Before speaking, ask, is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? Fail any gate, and the words stay unspoken. Practical exercises sharpen this muscle. Try the pause practice for 1 day. Place a 2-second delay before every utterance. Not to censor yourself, but to audit. Does this need to be said by me now? You'll notice how many words are reflexes, not choices. Another tool, complaint fasting. Go 24 hours without voicing any grievance, not even about traffic or weather. At first, it feels impossible. Then you discover something startling. Most complaints don't relieve stress, they reinforce it. Vocalizing annoyance often deepens it, like scratching a rash. The magic happens when you shift from passive speaking to active communication. Imagine 2 friends discussing a mutual acquaintance's career setback. The first spills every rumor, dissecting possible failures. The second listens, then asks, how could we support them? Both scenarios use words. One drains energy, the other builds it. That's Zeno's lesson in action. Speech isn't just sound, it's responsibility. Every sentence you utter is a vote for the kind of world and the kind of person you want to be. Dispersity thrives in uncontrolled language because chaos of words mirrors chaos of mind. But when you speak only what's necessary, you don't just communicate better, you think clearer, live lighter, and conserve the energy that matters. Seneca's letters from exile read like a masterclass in psychological alchemy, how to turn confinement into liberation. Banished to Corsica by Emperor Claudius on trumped-up charges, he found himself stranded on a rugged island far from Rome's marble halls. Yet his writings from that period contain no self-pity, only startling clarity. "The soul is our king," he wrote to a friend. "If it be safe, the rest is slavery or freedom only in name." This wasn't poetic exaggeration. Seneca was dissecting a fundamental truth. There are prisoners who walk freely through city streets, and there are free men locked in cells who have claimed more sovereignty than most rulers. History offers striking proof of this paradox. Take the Apollo astronauts confined for days in tiny capsules hurtling through space, technically trapped, yet their journals describe transcendent moments of awe. Contrast that with modern office workers pacing like caged animals in open-plan offices, free to leave but mentally shackled by deadlines and comparisons. Or consider Viktor Frankl in Auschwitz, who later wrote, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances." The common thread isn't circumstance, it's consciousness. The realization that your mind is the only territory no external force can occupy without your consent. So how do we cultivate this mental sovereignty? Begin with what Stoics called premeditatio los, visualizing your inner citadel. Picture a fortress within you, its walls built from your core values. At the center stands an inviolable chamber where your truest self resides. Now imagine life's chaos as a storm outside the walls demands criticisms, setbacks hurled like projectiles. They may rattle the gates, but they cannot breach the sanctum unless you grant entry. This isn't escapism, it's strategic detachment. When you mentally step back into this fortress during stress, you regain perspective. That critical email isn't an attack, it's noise at the gates. The traffic jam isn't ruining your day, it's just weather on the perimeter. Modern neuroscience validates this ancient practice. Studies on London taxi drivers who must memorize the city's labyrinthine streets show their hippocampi physically enlarge with training. Your mental fortress works the same way. Each time you consciously choose calm over panic, principle over impulse, you reinforce neural pathways of resilience. Start small. Next time you're interrupted mid-task, pause. Visualize the intrusion as debris bouncing off your walls, then gently return focus inward. With repetition, this becomes reflexive, not suppression of emotion, but mastery of attention. Seneca's exile ended after 8 years, but his letters reveal he'd won his freedom long before recall. While others pitied his banishment, he'd turned isolation into an opportunity for philosophical depth that would outlive Rome itself. That's the ultimate Stoic secret. Your kingdom isn't a place, it's a practice, and its borders hold firm only when you remember where the real walls stand, not around your body but within your mind. When you stop waiting for external permission to be at peace, you've already reclaimed your throne. Marcus Aurelius dropped a truth bomb 2,000 years before modern therapy existed. You suffer more in imagination than in reality. At first glance, it sounds like hollow reassurance until you test it. Picture this: you check your bank account and see an unexpected charge. Instantly, your heart races. By the time you call customer service, you've already imagined identity theft, drained savings, and financial ruin. Then the agent explains it's just a billing error fixed in minutes. The actual event was neutral. The horror story was your mind's creation. That's the Stoic revelation. Pain isn't in the facts, it's in the filter we place over them. This isn't just philosophy, it's neuroscience, cognitive behavioral therapy. The gold standard for treating anxiety builds on this exact principle. CBT teaches that our thoughts, not events, dictate our emotions. A breakup isn't inherently tragic. It's the belief I'll never find love again that crushes us. A job loss doesn't destroy confidence. The narrative I'm a failure does. Stoics and therapists converge on the same remedy. Examine your interpretations like a scientist inspecting data. Is this thought factual or just one possible lens? Let's role-play this shift. Imagine two friends experiencing the same breakup. The first spirals, "She was the one, I'll die alone." The second reflects, "This hurts, but relationships end for many reasons." Maybe we weren't aligned long-term. Same event, different suffering. Now apply this to money. Person A loses $20,000 and thinks, "My future is ruined." Person B loses the same amount but considers, "This sets me back, but I've rebuilt before." The financial loss is equal, the emotional toll isn't. Here's where Stoicism goes deeper than positive thinking. It's not about slapping a happy face on pain. It's about dismantling the mental amplifiers that turn stumbles into catastrophes. When Marcus wrote, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed," he wasn't denying hardship. He was highlighting our power to define it. A rainstorm isn't bad if you're a farmer needing crops to grow. A delayed flight isn't good or bad. It's an hour to read or fret, depending on your focus. Modern life bombards us with chances to practice this. That critical work email, it's either a personal attack or constructive feedback, your call, your child's tantrum. Either proof you're failing as a parent or a normal developmental phase. The Stoic move isn't ignoring reality, it's interrogating your assumptions about it. Next time you're stewing over a situation, ask, "What story am I telling myself here? Is this the only possible interpretation?" The answer won't erase the event, but it might just shrink the monster under the bed back down to mouse size. The Stoics had a radical way of sizing up life's concerns. They called it the hierarchy of indifference. Not indifferent as in uncaring, but as in recognizing that some things simply don't deserve the mental real estate we give them. Picture this: a Roman senator's villa burns down and all he says is, "At least my books are safe." That's not detachment, it's discernment. He knew scrolls contained wisdom that could rebuild fortunes, while marble floors were just decorative. Fast forward to today, where we melt down over delayed Amazon deliveries while ignoring neglected friendships, or rage at a scratched phone screen but tolerate a sleep-deprived, caffeine-fueled existence. Stoicism draws a line between what's truly precious and what's just polished distraction. Health, integrity, purpose, these are what the ancients called preferred indifference. Worth pursuing, but not because they define you. A luxury car, Instagram likes, or designer labels, preferred indifference. Nice if you have them, but meaningless if they cost your peace. Epictetus put it bluntly, it's not things that disturb us, but our judgments about them. That dead battery on your phone isn't the issue, it's the story you tell yourself about being disconnected that spins you into panic. Meanwhile, we breeze past real red flags: chronic stress we've normalized, relationships that drain us, careers misaligned with our values, because culture has trained us to sweat the wrong things. Here's how to reset your hierarchy. First, the Stoic stress test. Next time you're agitated, ask, "Will this matter in 5 years?" Flat tires won't. Habits eroding your health will. Second, the tombstone check. Imagine your epitaph. Will it read, "He never missed a trend," or "She loved deeply and lived with courage"? Third, the fire drill. If your home burned tonight, what 3 items would you grieve? Not your smart TV. Photos, heirlooms, that worn journal with your child's first scribbles. These reveal true priorities. Modern life thrives on manufactured urgency. Apps notify you that your streak will expire unless you post, as if digital consistency outweighs real-world presence. Airlines sell priority boarding to people carrying the same luggage at the same speed. Advertisers convince us that bottled water from Fiji hydrates better than the tap despite identical molecules. Stoicism slices through this noise. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events," he wasn't dismissing life's comforts. He was reminding us that obsessing over them turns privileges into prisons. Try this today for 24 hours. Notice every time frustration surfaces. Then categorize it. Is this a threat to your core values or just a wrinkle in convenience? The barrister misspelling your name on a cup doesn't diminish your identity. The colleague who interrupts you may need patience, not fury. Even traffic jams become neutral. They're only delays if you insist on controlling timelines. This isn't about lowering standards, it's about raising discernment. The more you practice indifference to trivialities, the clearer it becomes. Most of what we call problems are just pebbles we've trained ourselves to carry as boulders. And the weight you put down isn't just clutter, it's the space where purpose finally breathes. Anger, Seneca warned, is a brief insanity, one that leaves more wreckage than any actual madness. He wrote on anger after witnessing Rome's elite self-destruct over trivial slights, senators brawling over seating arrangements, generals executing subordinates for minor delays, husbands disinheriting children in fits of pique. The scenarios sound absurd until you recognize their modern equivalents. Road rage over a missed turn, keyboard wars sparked by typos, families fractured by holiday arguments that no one even remembers. What makes anger so corrosive isn't its intensity, it's the illusion of righteousness it creates. In the moment, rage feels like justice, but as Seneca observed, no plague has cost the human race more. Modern science maps why anger hijacks reason so completely. When triggered, your amygdala floods your system with cortisol and adrenaline, the same chemicals that prepped our ancestors to fight predators. Your prefrontal cortex, the brain's logic center, goes offline. Literally, brain scans show that during anger, neural activity shifts from higher reasoning to primal reaction. That's why you can't think straight. When furious, your biology prioritizes combat over calculus. The kicker, this chemical surge lasts only 90 seconds. Without fuel, the fire dies unless you keep feeding it with mental kindling, replaying the offense, imagining comebacks, ruminating on past grievances. Anger's true damage happens when we mistake a biochemical flare for a legitimate worldview. Stoic antidotes target this exact glitch. First, the deliberate pause. At the first spark of anger, train yourself to step out of the mental movie. Seneca advised counting to 24, the Latin alphabet's letters, before reacting. This isn't passive, it's strategic. You're not suppressing emotion, you're denying the amygdala its reflex control. Modern iterations might involve snapping a rubber band on your wrist or mentally reciting a mantra. This is a cortisol storm, not truth. The goal isn't to avoid conflict, but to engage from clarity, not chaos. Next, perspective anchors. Ancient Stoics would visualize their anger from death's vantage point. Will this matter on my last day? Modern adaptations might ask, will I remember this in 5 years? Or more pointedly, is this worth my peace? When a coworker takes credit for your idea, the immediate urge might be to publicly shame them. But the Stoic pause reveals the cost, temporary satisfaction traded for lasting reputation damage. Better to document contributions and address the pattern later calmly. The most potent tool, preemptive scripts. Seneca recommended rehearsing responses to common triggers. For instance, when X interrupts me, I'll assume they're eager, not rude. When traffic stalls, I'll listen to a podcast, not curse. These aren't affirmations, they're cognitive guardrails. Like fire drills, they prepare you to act wisely when adrenaline would otherwise decide. History's greatest leaders used versions of this. Gandhi trained himself to smile when insulted, derailing his opponent's expectations. Lincoln wrote hot letters, venting fury, then filed them unsent. What makes Stoic anger management radical isn't the absence of emotion, it's the refusal to let emotion dictate terms. When Epictetus said, "It's not what happens but how you take it," he wasn't dismissing pain. he was highlighting anger's dirty secret. It punishes you far more than its target. The neighbor who blasts music at midnight suffers no consequence from your sleepless rage. The colleague who slighted you likely forgot the incident while you replayed it for weeks. Anger is the poison you brew, then drink yourself. Try this tonight. Recall a recent anger spike, a rude comment, a bureaucratic hassle. Now dissect it. How much suffering came from the event itself, and how much from your prolonged reaction? That's the fork in the road. One path leads to Seneca's insight. To be angry is to revenge the faults of others upon ourselves. The other, the quiet power of choosing where your energy flows, not because the offense doesn't matter, but because you matter more. Diogenes the cynic lived in a clay barrel, owned a wooden bowl, and when he saw a child drinking water with cupped hands, he smashed even that, declaring nature had provided all he needed. Meanwhile, modern billionaires build megayachts with submarines and panic rooms, yet surveys show their life satisfaction often plateaus at $75,000 a year. These aren't just historical curiosities, they're data points in Stoicism's most counterintuitive equation. Wealth isn't about accumulating, it's about scaling desire to match reality. Seneca put it bluntly, it is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more who is poor. Consider two shopping carts. One holds carefully chosen items serving essential needs, a winter coat that will last a decade, groceries for nutritious meals. The other overflows with impulse buys, trend-chasing gadgets, and duplicates of things already owned. The actual cost isn't just the price tags, it's the mental bandwidth spent chasing, maintaining, and eventually discarding the excess. Studies from Princeton University reveal clutter increases cortisol levels, while minimalist environments enhance focus. This isn't about deprivation, it's about auditing what enough truly means for you. The Stoic practice of premeditatio malorum applies here. Imagine losing all possessions tomorrow. Which items would you sincerely miss? Those are your true essentials. Create an anti-consumerism filter before your next purchase. First, the use test. Will this serve a daily or weekly purpose, or just gather dust? Second, the cost per wear rule. That $100 jacket worn 200 times costs 50 cents per use, a bargain compared to a $20 shirt worn once. Third, the legacy check. Would this outlast me with value, like a well-bound book, or become landfill fodder? Alexander the Great, who conquered the known world but died at 32, allegedly requested his hands be left outside his coffin to show he took nothing with him. The Stoics took this further. Why burden your present with goods that won't matter at life's curtain call? Modern marketing thrives on manufactured lack. Social media convinces us that upgrades equal happiness, even though neuroscience confirms novelty wears off in weeks. The latest phone feels mundane by month 3. The designer bag's thrill fades after the 5th compliment. Contrast this with Diogenes sunbathing when Alexander visited him. The conqueror asked if he wanted anything. Diogenes replied, "Yes, stand aside, you're blocking my sunlight." That exchange holds a mirror to our own traps. How often do we trade real sunlight time, peace, autonomy for shadows of status? The Enough meditation closes this gap. Each morning, list 3 things you already possess that meet core needs: a roof, clean water, a working body. Then ask, if I could never acquire anything new beyond this, would I survive? The answer is almost always yes. This isn't resignation, it's emancipation from the hamster wheel of more. Financial advisor Ramit Seth interviews clients earning $500,000 yearly who feel broke, while others on $50,000 feel abundant. The variable isn't income, it's the alignment between means and desires. Real wealth begins when you stop moving the goalposts. The yacht owner envies the one with a bigger yacht. The minimalist sleeping soundly under stars envies no one. As Epictetus observed, freedom isn't secured by filling your barns, but by emptying your wants. Your bank statement matters less than your ability to look at it without craving another digit. That's the ultimate luxury, not having what you want, but wanting what you already have. Seneca's words slice through the noise of our anxieties like a surgeon's scalpel. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. Picture this: you're lying awake at 3 a.m., heart pounding as your mind races through every possible way tomorrow's presentation could go wrong. The tech fails, your voice cracks, the audience heckles. By sunrise, you're exhausted not from the actual event, but from rehearsing disasters that never materialize. Studies from the University of Cincinnati reveal something startling. 85 to 90% of the scenarios we agonize over either never happen or unfold far less severely than feared. That's not optimism, it's statistical fact. Our brains are catastrophe factories, pumping out worst-case scenarios with the efficiency of a conveyor belt. And the toll isn't just mental, it's physiological. Chronic worry triggers the same stress response as actual danger, flooding your system with cortisol that weakens immunity, disrupts digestion, and even accelerates aging. The Stoics had a name for this self-inflicted torment: prosauch, the art of attention to mental hygiene. They didn't deny uncertainty, they weaponized awareness against it. Take Seneca's nightly practice. Before sleep, he'd review his day's worries and categorize them. Did this occur, or did I invent it? If it occurred, was it as dire as I feared? More often than not, he found his suffering was homemade, a fiction his mind had drafted, edited, and obsessively reread. Modern therapists call this decatastrophizing, and it's the backbone of anxiety treatments today. When patients track their feared outcomes versus reality over weeks, the gap between expectation and experience becomes undeniable, that looming layoff. A restructuring spared your department, the medical symptom you Googled, a benign vitamin deficiency. The irony: even when disasters do strike, we handle them better than imagined. The human capacity for adaptation is staggering, but only when we stop rehearsing tragedies that haven't earned the spotlight. Here's how to break the cycle. First, worry time boxing, a technique adapted from cognitive therapy. Designate 10 minutes each morning, never before bed, as your official catastrophe hour. Write every fear gnawing at you: my partner will leave me, I'll fail the exam, the biopsy will be malignant. Then apply Seneca's filter: is this a current reality or a hypothetical? If hypothetical, label it unpaid rent on a future you don't own. Next, the probability audit. For each fear, assign a percentage likelihood based on past experience. That terrifying plane crash: statistically, you're more likely to be struck by lightning while petting a shark. Finally, the contingency draft. For the few valid concerns, outline action steps. If X happens, I'll do Y. This isn't naive positivity, it's strategic preparedness. The goal isn't to eliminate uncertainty, but to cordon it off from hijacking your present. History's resilience is written by those who mastered this pivot. Consider Thomas Edison's lab burning down at 67. Reporters found him watching the flames, already sketching rebuilt worktables. There's value in disaster, he noted. All our mistakes are ashes now. Or Malala Yousafzai, who, after surviving an assassination attempt, refused to dwell on what-ifs about future threats, focusing instead on her education mission. These aren't superhumans, they're practitioners of a simple truth. Hypothetical suffering is a tax on a life you're not even living. The Stoic shift happens when you start treating what if like spam mail, something to scan for relevance before deleting. Those middle-of-the-night terrors, they're not prophecies. They're your mind's overzealous fire drill, ringing alarms for flames that don't exist. Seneca's insight endures because it's not about denying pain, it's about refusing to prepare for it. The presentation might go poorly, or it might be your breakthrough. The relationship could end, or this might be the conflict that deepens it. Uncertainty is the price of admission to a life that's authentically lived. And the quieter your imagination's doomsday chorus becomes, the more clearly you'll hear the music already playing in the room where you actually stand. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who trained Epictetus, noticed something profound about envy. It's the only emotion that offers zero pleasure. Anger can feel righteous, sadness cathartic, even fear can be thrilling. But envy, it just burns. Ancient Stoics saw this corrosive emotion for what it really was, wasted energy wrapped in delusion. When you seethe over someone else's success, you're not hurting them, you're poisoning your own potential. But here's the twist, buried in that resentment is a roadmap to your own growth. If you're willing to flip the script, picture two artists scrolling Instagram. One sees a peer's gallery opening and spirals, "Why them and not me?" The other pauses, then asks, "What can I learn from their journey?" That pivot from envy to emulation isn't just semantics. It's mental alchemy. The Stoics called this zelos, or zealous imitation, not copying outcomes but reverse engineering the habits that created them. When Musonius advised students to study admired figures' daily routines, he wasn't promoting hero worship, he was revealing envy's secret utility. It points to what we value but haven't yet earned. Modern research validates this ancient hack. A Harvard study tracking workplace dynamics found employees who reframed jealousy as curiosity about colleagues' strategies reported higher motivation and career satisfaction. Meanwhile, those ruminating on unfairness showed decreased productivity. The difference wasn't talent, it was focus. Envy fixates on the trophy, emulation examines the training logs. Consider the fitness world. Beginners obsess over influencers' physiques. Seasoned lifters scrutinize their meal plans and sleep schedules. One mindset breeds resentment, the other results. Start an emulation journal with 3 columns. First, the spark. Note when envy flares, maybe a co-worker's promotion or a friend's relationship. Second, the substance. Research what preceded their success. Did they upskill nightly, network strategically, handle rejection differently? Third, the strategy. Adapt one actionable element to your life. If you envy a writer's book deal, track their submission routine rather than their celebratory posts. This isn't about becoming them, it's about borrowing their ladder to reach your own heights. History's greats practiced this instinctively. Michelangelo didn't sulk over rival sculptors' commissions. He apprenticed under them, mastering techniques they guarded jealously. Social media amplifies envy's distortion. We see polished highlights without the grind that created them, the failed prototypes, rejected drafts, sleepless nights. Stoicism counters this with antilogia, the discipline of counter-narratives. For every envy-triggering post, consciously add context. This vacation photo took 10 years of savings. Their startup success followed 3 bankruptcies. Better yet, follow accounts showcasing the messy middle, filmmakers sharing rough cuts, scientists posting failed experiments. When you see the sweat behind the shine, comparison loses its fangs. Musonius took this further with his admiration audits. He'd have students list traits they envied, then interview people who embodied them. The revelations were predictable. No one's path was as linear as it appeared. A senator's eloquent speeches, years of stuttering through forum debates. A merchant's wealth, decades of shipwrecks and swindles. This practice exposes envy's dirty secret. We want the crown without the calluses. But the Stoics knew better. What makes others worthy of admiration is precisely what makes their achievements unenviable. They earn them. Tonight, try this reframe. Think of someone you're jealous of and write down 3 specific actions they took to get there. Not luck, not privilege actions. Then pick one to emulate this week. Maybe it's waking an hour earlier like that prolific author, or practicing deliberate cold calls like the top salesperson. Envy screams, "That should be mine." Emulation whispers, "Show me how." Only one of those voices builds empires, both outer and inner. Epictetus entered the world as property, a slave whose body belonged to another man. Yet his writings reveal a mind so free it would shape Western thought for millennia. This paradox holds the key to Stoicism's most liberating truth: your circumstances don't define your dignity. The master who owned Epictetus could chain his limbs but not his thoughts. That's the razor's edge between victimhood and sovereignty. Modern psychology terms this locus of control, the degree to which we believe we direct our lives. Victims see themselves as chess pieces moved by external hands. Students, like Epictetus, recognize they may not choose the board but always control how they play the game. Consider two prison cells at Rome's Mamertine dungeon. In one, a wealthy merchant wails about betrayal, his velvet robes now rags. In the next, Seneca scribbles letters that will outlive the empire that jailed him. Both men face identical bars, but only one treats confinement as a classroom. Fast forward to modern America, where researcher Viktor Frankl documented a similar divide in concentration camps. Some prisoners collapsed into despair while others, starving, beaten, shared crusts of bread and whispered poetry. The variable wasn't suffering, it was the meaning assigned to it. Language exposes this mindset in real time. Victims say, "I have to work late." Students think, "I get to sharpen my skills." The first sees obligation, the second opportunity. Try this reframe exercise for one day. Every time you catch yourself saying, "I have to," replace it with, "I choose to." Traffic, "I choose to practice patience." Deadline, "I choose to focus under pressure." This isn't wordplay, it's neural rewiring. Stanford studies show that passive phrasing activates stress responses, while active language engages problem-solving brain regions. History's most resilient figures mastered this pivot. James Stockdale, the Navy pilot tortured in Hanoi's prisons, credited Epictetus with his survival. While cellmates cracked under isolation, Stockdale treated interrogations as philosophy exams, each beating a test of his principles. Meanwhile, back home, privileged colleagues complained about lukewarm coffee and slow promotions. The lesson: adversity isn't the enemy, reliance on comfort is. Your turn. Identify one area where you feel trapped, a job, relationship, or habit. Now dissect it through Epictetus's lens. What aspects truly bind you and what freedoms remain untapped? The employee stuck in a toxic office can still control their evening self-education. The parent overwhelmed by childcare can reframe tantrums as patience drills. Even chronic illness becomes a harsh professor teaching endurance. This isn't about denying pain, it's about refusing to let pain deny your growth. The ultimate freedom lies between stimulus and response, that split second where you decide whether to curse the storm or adjust the sails. Chains only exist where you stop looking for keys, and sometimes, like Epictetus discovered, the key was in your mind all along. Marcus Aurelius carved a truth into parchment that still cuts deep today. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. This wasn't morbid speculation, it was mathematical urgency. Picture his mortality math. Assuming you live to 80, you have roughly 4,000 weeks. Subtract time spent sleeping, eating, commuting. Suddenly, you're left with a startlingly small number of truly discretionary hours. Now open your phone's screen time report. The average person spends over 3 years of their life scrolling social media alone. That's not an indictment, it's an invitation to audit what philosopher William Irvine calls your life currency. Consider two neighbors. One spends evenings binge-watching shows she barely remembers, mornings lost in algorithmic rabbit holes. The other, diagnosed with a chronic illness, structures each day like a curated museum, saying no to trivial obligations to preserve energy for her children's laughter, her woodworking projects, slow walks, noticing the way light filters through oak leaves. The difference isn't discipline, it's perspective. Mortality isn't a distant abstraction, it's the lens that turns someday into this hour. Try the deathbed prioritization drill. Lie flat, close your eyes, and visualize your final moments. Not with fear, but clarity. What memories will you replay? Whose hands will you want to hold? Which accomplishments will feel meaningful, and which will reveal themselves as chasing validation? When author Bronnie Ware interviewed hospice patients, their regrets crystallized into 5 themes: working too much, suppressing feelings, neglecting friendships, lacking courage to live authentically, and forgetting that happiness is a choice. Notice what's absent: no one wished they'd checked more emails or bought trendier clothes. Time's true weight becomes tangible when measured in irreplaceable units. That meeting dragging into its second hour, that's 11 thousandths of your remaining lifespan. The argument over parking spots, approximately 6/10 thousandths. This isn't about morbid accounting, it's about recalibrating your worth it meter. When tech CEO Steve Jobs awoke each morning, he asked himself, if today were my last, would I do what I'm about to do? If the answer was no too many days straight, he knew to pivot. The Stoic twist: this awareness shouldn't paralyze, it should emancipate. Those trivial obligations you dread, decline them. The hobby you've postponed for years, start badly today. The grudge you're nursing, release it like expiring currency. Your future self won't measure life in years, but in moments that shimmered with aliveness. The conversations that ran deep, the risks that scared you into growth, the ordinary mornings you noticed were extraordinary simply because you showed up fully. A Swiss clockmaker once built a timepiece with a tiny hourglass inside. Its sand drained over 12 months, then flipped automatically. Owners reported an eerie phenomenon. Watching those grains fall made them cancel trivial appointments and finally book that alpine hike. We all have an inner hourglass, but ours lacks the courtesy of visibility. Marcus knew this, that's why he wrote reminders to himself like sticky notes for the soul. Your phone's screen time tracker isn't a guilt trip, it's a modern memento mori. Every minute spent is a conscious trade. The question isn't whether you're spending time, but whether time is spending you. A broken bone sends signals of distress. No philosophy can override physical pain, is biology's blunt but necessary alarm system. Emotional suffering, though, that's a different story. The Stoics drew a line between the two with surgical precision. Pain is inevitable in this human body, but agony is negotiable. A surgeon in ancient Rome and one in a modern operating theater both feel the sting of a scalpel slip, but only one might compound that with nights of self-flagellation, replaying the mistake on loop. The overlap with Buddhism here is striking. The Dalai Lama once observed, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. Both traditions converge on this truth. Raw sensation is one thing, the stories we layer over it are another. Consider the case of Dr. Rachel Naomi Remen, a physician who treats chronic illness patients. She recounts a conversation with a terminally ill Stoic practitioner who said, "My body is in revolt, but my mind is at peace." Contrast that with another patient, similar diagnosis, but drowning in "why me?" despair. The difference wasn't prognosis or pain levels, it was the mental architecture each had built beforehand. Modern pain clinics now integrate this wisdom, teaching patients to separate sensation from narrative. A burning nerve might rate a 7 on the pain scale, but the thought, "this will never end," turns it into an 11. The neuroscience behind this is revelatory. When researchers at Harvard hooked chronic pain sufferers to fMRI machines, they found something fascinating. Those trained in Stoic-style cognitive reframing showed decreased activity in the anterior cingulate cortex, the brain's distress amplifier. Their pain signals hadn't vanished, but their suffering had dimmed. Like adjusting a microscope's focus, they'd learned to observe discomfort without merging with it. This isn't denial, it's discernment. The Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh described it as holding pain like a crying baby, a present, tender, but not identical to it. History offers brutal test cases. Admiral James Stockdale, shot down over Vietnam and tortured for 7 years, emerged with a startling observation: the optimists died first. Not because they lacked hope, but because they attached it to unrealistic timelines. We'll be out by Christmas. When Christmas passed, their spirit broke. The Stoics, they endured by embracing the paradox. I may be here indefinitely, but today I control how I meet this moment. Stockdale credited Epictetus's teachings for his survival, proving that even in a Hanoi prison cell, some freedoms remain unshackled. You don't need a prison or illness to test this. Next time you're stuck in traffic with a screaming bladder, notice the two layers: the physical urgency undeniable, and the mental rant about idiot drivers optional. Or when a critique stings, try the Stoic Buddhist double lens. This feedback hurts, but does my reaction help or hinder? Pain narrows, perspective widens. The throbbing knee after a fall is biology. The belief that aging means decline, that's culture, fear, unexamined assumptions, all territories you can govern. The liberating punchline: you'll never control life's hammers, but you can choose whether they shatter you or shape you. Chronic pain patients who adopt this mindset often report a curious shift. Their suffering lessens not because their condition improves, but because they stop warring with reality. Like a clenched fist relaxing around a thorn, the grip itself was the wound. That's the final alchemy. When you stop resisting pain's presence, you drain its power to define you. The sensation remains, the struggle doesn't have to. Seneca's razor-sharp words cut through the modern myth of busyness like a scalpel through fog. Life is long if you know how to use it. At first glance, it sounds like naive optimism until you run the numbers. The average human lifespan stretches roughly 4,000 weeks. Subtract sleep, meals, and necessities, and you're left with a reservoir of time deeper than most dare to acknowledge. So why does it feel like you're constantly drowning? Enter false urgency, the artificial sense that everything must happen now, a psychological smog pumped relentlessly by hustle culture's factories. The Stoics saw this coming 2 millennia ago. They watched Roman elites frantically chase status and wealth, only to collapse onto their deathbeds realizing they'd mistaken motion for meaning. Nothing's changed except now. Our inboxes and notifications are the whips cracking us forward. Consider Parkinson's law, the observation that work expands to fill the time allotted. A task that could take 2 hours will magically consume 2 days if given the space. Modern offices are petri dishes for this phenomenon. That report to Friday. Somehow, it's midnight Thursday before real progress begins. But here's the twist: the same law works in reverse. When a surgeon has 30 minutes to remove an appendix or a chef has 90 seconds to plate a dish, focus becomes laser-like. Constraints don't crush excellence, they create it. The problem isn't lack of time, it's the illusion that more time would solve everything. Start an experiment tomorrow. Delay every non-critical email response by 24 hours. You'll discover something startling. Most urgent requests resolve themselves without your input. The colleague who needed immediate feedback finds a workaround. The client's emergency was really just poor planning on their end. This isn't laziness, it's strategic filtration. Seneca practiced this with letters, often waiting days to reply, not out of rudeness, but to distinguish real priorities from manufactured crises. Hustle culture thrives on borrowed anxiety. Social media posts glorify all-nighters like badges of honor, but study after study shows cognitive decline after 16 hours awake is equivalent to legal drunkenness. The entrepreneur bragging about a packed schedule, track their actual output, and you'll often find frantic activity masking shallow results. Contrast this with Marie Curie, who took afternoon walks to clarify her thoughts, or Charles Darwin, who worked just 4 focused hours a day. Their legacies weren't built on exhaustion, they were carved with deliberate, undistracted effort. Reclaim your hours with the Stoic triage method. First, the tombstone test. Ask if this task would make your epitaph. Second, the fire drill. If your office burned tonight, what work would truly matter? Third, the Roman's razor. Cut anything that serves only to impress others rather than improve yourself. When author Cal Newport tracked his deep work hours versus shallow busy work, he found an inverse relationship. The less he acted productive, the more he actually achieved. The lie of false urgency whispers that speed equals significance. But history's most enduring work, Leonardo's paintings, Shakespeare's sonnets, Einstein's theories, wasn't rushed. It was nurtured in spaces where time was respected, not ravaged. Your inbox will never send you a thank you note for sacrificing your sanity to it, the projects that truly define you. They'll flourish when you stop mistaking haste for hustle and start treating your hours like the finite, precious currency they are. Arrian's Enchiridion, the handbook distilling Epictetus's teachings, contains a line that would make modern CEOs sweat. Work to maintain your own character, not to win trophies. At first glance, it sounds antithetical to achievement, but unpack it and you'll find Stoicism's most liberating paradox. The tighter you cling to results, the more you sabotage the very excellence that produces them. Consider the archer's dilemma Epictetus loved to cite. The bowman controls his stance, his aim, his release, but once the arrow leaves the string, wind, luck, and interference take over. The Stoic archer doesn't measure success by whether the target is hit, but by whether every controllable variable was mastered. Modern startup culture is littered with targets missed for reasons beyond founders' control: market crashes, supply chain breakdowns, algorithmic whims. But talk to founders who have adopted Stoic principles and you'll hear a different narrative. Sarah, a tech entrepreneur who pivoted her company 3 times before a breakthrough, describes it as focusing on the inputs like they're scripture and treating outcomes like weather. When her first product failed to gain traction, she audited only what she could own. Customer interviews conducted, iterations tested, skills leveled up. The eventual pivot that succeeded, it emerged from those granular improvements, not from obsessing over vanity metrics. This mindset shift isn't just philosophical, it's neurological. Stanford research on process praise versus outcome praise reveals something startling. Children praised for effort, you worked hard on that, develop resilience and creativity. Those congratulated only for results, you're so smart, crumble at setbacks. Adults are no different. When marathon runners fixate on finish times rather than training consistency, they're more likely to overtrain or quit. The Stoic solution, a daily control scorecard. Instead of tracking revenue volatile or likes fickle, log what you directly governed. Difficult conversations initiated, hours of deep work protected, negative thoughts intercepted. At week's end, you'll have something no market fluctuation can erase: evidence of your own evolution. History's greatest innovators operated this way. Thomas Edison's lab famously burned down in 1914, destroying years of prototypes. His response: "Thank goodness all our mistakes were just burned up." Now we can start fresh. Notice what he didn't say: "If only I'd prevented that fire." He owned his relentless iteration, not the uncontrollable spark. Or consider Marcus Aurelius, who journaled not about winning wars, but about showing up each morning with integrity regardless of the day's chaos. Here's how to operationalize this today. First, the 90-10 split. Dedicate 90% of your planning to actions, study schedules, skill drills, outreach quotas, 10% to outcome tracking. Second, the detachment drill. When receiving feedback, mentally separate the actionable. My pitch pacing was off from the circumstantial. The investor was distracted. Third, the legacy lens. Ask, if I were mentoring someone, would I want them to replicate my effort or just envy my results? The magic happens when you realize outcomes aren't report cards, they're redirections. That rejected manuscript, it wasn't proof you can't write, it was a nudge toward the right publisher. The failed experiment, not evidence of incompetence, but a checkpoint eliminating dead ends. Mastery lies in the gap between what you can command and what you must release. As Epictetus put it, no thing great is created suddenly, any more than a bunch of grapes or a fig. You don't control the harvest, only the tending of vines, and sometimes the sweetest fruit grows from branches you least expected. Democritus of Abdera earned a nickname that still echoes through philosophy classrooms 24 centuries later, the laughing philosopher. While his peers pondered existence with furrowed brows, he watched human folly with silent amusement, chuckling at our collective seriousness about things that, in the grand scheme, mean nothing. Legend says travelers would seek him out expecting profound wisdom, only to find him giggling at a baker's tantrum over burnt bread or a merchant's despair at a rained-out market day. His secret wasn't indifference, it was perspective. He grasped a fundamental truth: much of what we treat as tragedy is, objectively speaking, comedy in disguise. Fast forward to modern traffic jams. Picture two drivers stuck in identical gridlock. One pounds the steering wheel, face reddening as if the universe personally insulted him. The other, perhaps recalling Democritus, notices the absurdity of 2 tons of metal sitting idle because a squirrel chewed through a power line 3 miles away. One man suffers, the other collects material for his next dinner party story. This isn't about dismissing genuine pain. It's about recognizing how often we inflate trivialities into torment. Monty Python built an empire on this very observation. Their Dead Parrot sketch, a masterclass in Stoic satire highlighting how humans will argue passionately over something already expired, whether it's a pet, a relationship, or an outdated belief. Start a satire journal this week. Whenever frustration bubbles, a delayed flight, a crashed laptop, a mysteriously shrinking jean size, pause and draft a mock news headline exposing the absurdity. Local man convinces himself email response time correlates with human worth. Woman pays extra for avocado toast while ancient Romans ate banquets for similar coin. The act of phrasing irritations as punchlines accomplishes 2 things. It creates psychological distance from the stressor, and it reveals how many of our crises would play as slapstick in hindsight. Comedian George Carlin perfected this, turning societal obsessions like materialism into routines that made audiences laugh. Then think, there's neuroscience behind the power of this shift. When researchers at Maryland Medical Center showed subjects comedy clips during stressful tasks, they found something remarkable. Laughter didn't just distract from stress, it physically reduced cortisol levels and increased endorphins. The brain literally processes humor as an antidote to despair. The Stoics knew this instinctively. Even stern Marcus Aurelius had moments of wry self-awareness, journaling about how future generations wouldn't remember, let alone care, about the Senate debates consuming his days. History's resilient figures often wielded humor like a shield. Viktor Frankl observed in Auschwitz that prisoners who retained the ability to joke about their captors often survived longest. Not because the horrors weren't real, but because mockery stripped the Nazis of perceived omnipotence. Modern studies on burnout in healthcare workers reveal a parallel. Those who reframe bureaucratic frustrations as dark comedy show higher resilience. The nurse labeling paperwork, how many trees must die before admin is happy, isn't being unprofessional, she's preserving her sanity. Try this tonight. Recount your most irritating moment of the day as if it were a scene in a sitcom. Exaggerate the characters, yourself included. Cast the slow barrister as a Zen master testing your patience. Frame your Wi-Fi outage as a conspiracy by the universe to make you finally read that paperback gathering dust. Democritus didn't laugh to trivialize life's challenges. He laughed to avoid letting those challenges trivialize his joy. Your worst day is just raw material for a story you'll someday tell with a smile, so why wait? The punchline's already writing itself. Marcus Aurelius never met his mother. She died shortly after his birth, yet his journals overflow with a startlingly modern understanding of love's paradox. On one page, he writes of cherishing his family deeply. On another, he cautions, when you kiss your child at night, whisper to yourself that they may die tomorrow. This wasn't morbid pessimism, it was emotional alchemy. By confronting love's fragility, he prevented attachment from curdling into dependence. Modern psychology now validates this ancient practice. Developmental studies reveal that children with secure attachment don't cling desperately to caregivers. They explore freely, knowing the bond remains unbroken even in separation. The healthiest adult relationships mirror this dynamic, two whole people choosing each other, not two halves seeking completion. Consider the difference between a vine and a tree. The vine wraps itself around the oak, eventually strangling its host. The redwood stands tall on its own roots, even as its branches intertwine with others in the canopy. Love addiction operates like the vine, mistaking entanglement for intimacy, treating partners as emotional scaffolding rather than fellow travelers. Psychologists call this anxious attachment, often born from childhood experiences where love felt conditional or unreliable. The antidote isn't detachment, but what the Stoics called autarkeia, self-sufficiency of the soul. Marcus modeled this in his marriage to Faustina, whom history remembers as unfaithful. Rather than collapsing into jealousy or denial, he wrote, "When another's vice offends you, turn inward to examine your own." This doesn't mean enduring toxicity. Modern Stoicism clarifies, setting boundaries is self-sufficiency in action. When a friend consistently drains your energy, limiting contact isn't rejection, it's stewardship of your inner citadel. The key lies in distinguishing between needing someone and valuing them. Neither Thurmond, a therapist specializing in attachment wounds, uses a powerful exercise. Clients list what they fear losing if a relationship ended. Those who cite, "I'd feel worthless" or "I couldn't cope," reveal where they've outsourced their self-worth. Those who say, "I'd miss our inside jokes" or "our sunset hikes" demonstrate healthier bonds. Now the solo travel challenge, a modern twist on Stoic self-reliance. Book 3 days alone in an unfamiliar city with 3 rules. No social media check-ins, no calling home for reassurance, and 1 meal eaten silently at a bustling cafe. The first hours often trigger anxiety, what psychologists term emotional anorexia, the fear of being deprived of relational nourishment. But by day 3, something shifts. You notice the play of light on cobblestones without rushing to photograph it. A stranger's smile at the market feels genuinely warm, not just a prelude to conversation. This isn't about becoming a hermit, it's about resetting your emotional GPS to recognize you were never truly lost. Attachment theory pioneer John Bowlby once said, "All of us are, from cradle to grave, students of how to love." The Stoics would add, "And the first lesson is learning you were never incomplete." That text left unanswered isn't abandonment, it's someone else's storyline. The quiet evenings once spent waiting for invitations become canvases for curiosity. Marcus Aurelius didn't journal about love to fill a void, but to honor the love that already existed within him. And that's the secret. The healthiest relationships don't complete you, they celebrate that you already are. The ancient Stoics didn't just face obstacles, they trained for them like athletes preparing for the Olympics. Picture a boxer who only ever shadowboxed in front of a mirror, then stepped into the ring expecting to dominate. He'd crumble under the first real punch. That's how most of us approach life's challenges, untrained, unprepared, and shocked when we get knocked down. But what if you could reframe every problem as a personalized workout for your resilience? The Roman philosopher Musonius Rufus had his students practice poverty by sleeping on hard beds and eating simple meals. But here's the twist, he wasn't teaching deprivation. He was building their psychological calluses. Now fast forward to Coronado, where Navy SEAL candidates endure Hell Week, 5 days of constant physical torment with less than 4 hours of total sleep. The final test isn't strength or speed, it's the ability to perceive suffering differently. Instructors don't just create obstacles, they manufacture opportunities to practice what Stoics called apatheia. Not apathy, but the mastery of emotional turbulence. When a trainee drags his waterlogged body across freezing sand, he's not just building endurance, he's proving to himself that his worst-case scenario imagination has been lying to him all along. Neuroscientists studying these candidates found something revelatory. The ones who succeed aren't those with the highest pain tolerance, but those who have learned to separate sensation from narrative. The burning in their muscles is real. The belief that they can't continue is optional. This mental repackaging works for everyday challenges too. Start an obstacle gratitude list, a deliberate inventory of headaches you're secretly lucky to have. That coworker who nitpicks your reports, he's your patience spotter. The software update that erased your files, forced adaptability training. Even traffic jams become focus drills. How long can you maintain calm amid chaos? Modern psychology confirms this ancient hack. When University of Buffalo researchers tracked people through financial crises, health scares, and career blows, they discovered a counterintuitive pattern. Those who viewed stress as enhancing rather than debilitating showed lower inflammation markers and higher life satisfaction. Your body listens to how you label strain. Call it unfair, and cortisol floods your system. Call it fertilizer, and you secrete growth hormones instead. Here's the template. Take any recurring frustration and break it into 3 columns. First, the lift. What specific muscle does this challenge work? A micromanaging boss might train your assertiveness or emotional regulation. Second, the PR, your personal record of past victories over similar obstacles. Last month's showdown with IT over a crashed server proved you can troubleshoot under pressure. Third, the spotter, who or what can backstop you. Maybe it's a mentor on speed dial or a playlist that resets your mood. This isn't about toxic positivity, it's about strategic reframing. Navy SEAL don't pretend hypothermia feels good. They focus on the fact that surviving it makes office politics feel trivial by comparison. Marcus Aurelius left us the ultimate training manual. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. He didn't write this during peacetime, but while commanding troops on the frozen Danube frontier. His tent had no heater, his enemies outnumbered him, and yet he saw barbarian invasions as opportunities to refine his leadership. Modern life won't ask you to defend empire borders, but it will ambush you with leaked spreadsheets, tantruming toddlers, and Wi-Fi dead zones. The principle remains identical. Every irritation comes with hidden reps. Missed flights train adaptability. Awkward conversations hone courage. Even loneliness can be the barbell that strengthens your relationship with yourself. The weights never get lighter, you just get stronger, and one day you'll realize the obstacles you once dreaded have become the reason others look to you when storms hit. That's the Stoic transformation, not avoiding life's gym, but learning to thrive in it, because the day will come when you'll need every psychological callus you've earned, and you'll be ready. Epictetus sketched a brilliant metaphor for how we carry our burdens. Every circumstance has 2 handles, one by which it can be lifted and another by which it can't. Pull from the wrong side and you strain under an impossible weight. Choose the right one and what once crushed you becomes manageable. Picture a traveler lugging an overstuffed suitcase through a train station, sweating and stumbling until a porter points out the telescoping handle hidden beneath. That's the essence of Stoic focus, realizing most suffering comes not from the load itself, but from how we attempt to grip it. The past and future, they're the ultimate misaligned handles. One's already gone, the other isn't guaranteed. Yet we exhaust ourselves dragging both like phantom luggage through every present moment. Modern psychology reveals the cost of this temporal imbalance. Studies on PTSD patients at Johns Hopkins show something fascinating. Their flashbacks aren't just memories, they're full sensory relivings, as if the past hijacks their nervous system. Meanwhile, anxiety sufferers at Harvard's Brain Lab exhibit reverse symptoms. Their brains light up as if hypothetical futures are unfolding in real time. Both conditions share a core dysfunction, the inability to anchor in what's actually happening now. The Stoic antidote isn't denial but recalibration. When Epictetus advised, "Don't seek events to happen as you wish, but wish them to happen as they do," he wasn't endorsing passivity, he was prescribing presence. Try this sensory drill next time the past/future tug feels overwhelming. The 5-4-3-2-1 technique. Spot 5 things you see, not just registering but noting textures like the grain in your desk wood or the way light bends through your water glass. 4 things you hear, the hum of appliances you normally tune out, the cadence of your own breath. 3 things you touch, the coolness of your phone screen, the tension in your shoulders you've ignored for hours. 2 smells, coffee grounds, rain-soaked pavement through an open window. 1 taste often overlooked, but maybe the lingering mint of toothpaste or the acidity of that last sip of tea. This isn't distraction, it's neural rebellion. You're recruiting your senses to overthrow your timeline-obsessed thoughts. History's trauma survivors have stumbled onto versions of this without knowing its name. Viktor Frankl described prisoners in Auschwitz focusing intensely on crafting tiny gifts for each other from scavenged materials, an act that grounded them in creation rather than despair. Modern first responders use similar focus techniques during crises, zeroing in on the specific task rather than the surrounding chaos, the common thread. Presence isn't the absence of pain, it's the refusal to let pain monopolize your attention. Here's where Stoicism goes beyond temporary coping. Epictetus's 2 handles aren't just about reducing suffering, they're about reclaiming agency. That argument from last week, turning it over in your mind for the 100th time, is like gripping the broken handle. It drains you without moving anything. But the learning you extracted about your communication style, that's the functional handle, the one that lets you carry the experience differently next time. Same event, different grip. The future operates similarly. Climate anxiety paralyzes some people into doom scrolling, while others channel it into community composting initiatives. Both groups face the same uncertain forecasts, but one handles the weight, the other lets the weight handle them. Neuroscientist Judson Brewer's research on habit loops reveals why this works. When you anchor in present actions, sorting recyclables, planting drought-resistant gardens, you activate the brain's reward system more effectively than passive worrying ever could. Tonight, test this with a simple ritual. Set a timer for 3 minutes and jot down every thought that arises, no censorship. Then categorize each: past regrets, old wounds, future deadlines, hypotheticals, or present physical sensations, immediate surroundings. Most lists skew heavily toward what's not actually here. That's your proof of practice. Noticing the drift is the first step in relearning how to hold time differently. Epictetus's handles aren't just philosophical metaphors, they're neurological levers, and the present moment is always waiting, solid and weight-bearing, for you to find your grip. Rufus, the Stoic teacher who shaped Epictetus, left us a razor-sharp standard for speech. Say only what your conscience permits. At first glance, it sounds simple until you realize how rarely we actually do it. Think about your last conversation. How much of it was truth and how much was performance, words tailored to impress, to fit in, to avoid conflict? The Roman Forum wasn't so different from today's social feeds. Senators flattered emperors knowing their lies could save their lives. Ordinary citizens exaggerated achievements to climb social ladders. Rufus saw through this theater, recognizing that every time we mold truth for convenience, we erode something far more precious than reputation, our integrity. Modern media turns this challenge into an obstacle course. Headlines optimized for outrage, influencers peddling half-truths for engagement, politicians framing narratives rather than facts. The Stoic solution isn't cynicism, it's what scholars now call epistemic hygiene. Start with this audit. Track all information inputs for 1 day, news consumed, conversations had, posts scrolled. Then apply Rufus's filter. Does this align with what I know to be true? Not, is this entertaining? Or, does this confirm my biases, but would I stake my character on this? You'll likely find swaths of mental real estate occupied by content that fails the test. Truth-telling's real test comes when stakes are high. Ancient Stoics practiced with a consequences worksheet, a precursor to modern decision matrices. Draw 4 columns: the lie, short-term gain, long-term cost, and alternative truths. Fill it out for scenarios like a co-worker taking credit for your idea. The lie, staying silent to avoid conflict, short-term gain, peacekeeping, long-term cost, resentment and misattributed work, alternative truth. Glad you found my proposal useful, let's present it together. This isn't about blunt honesty, it's about strategic integrity. Journalists at outlets like Reuters use a similar framework called hierarchy of truths. A fact isn't just verified, it's weighed for contextual importance. Reporting that a politician misspoke once is technically true, but may create a false impression of incompetence if isolated from thousands of accurate statements. Stoicism extends this principle to daily speech. Before sharing that juicy gossip, ask, is this relevant, necessary, kind? If it clears all 3 gates, proceed, but often you'll find your hand pausing mid-keyboard. Consider 2 neighbors discussing a third's divorce. Version 1. Did you hear? They're splitting, probably cheating. Version 2. They're navigating a separation, must be tough. Both are technically true, but one seeds poison while the other preserves dignity. The gap between them is where character lives. Marcus Aurelius modeled this in his court, refusing to indulge in the emperor's typical backbiting. His journals reveal why. The wrongdoer wrongs himself by doing wrong. The truth-teller strengthens himself by speaking true. The ultimate test comes when truth costs you something. A study on whistleblowers found they share one trait. They'd rehearsed ethical decisions long before crises hit. Like Stoics visualizing adversity, they'd mentally walked through scenarios where loyalty to truth meant losing jobs or friendships. When the moment came, they weren't acting courageously, they were simply being consistent. Start small. Next time a server overcharges you by $2, point it out. Not for the money, but to train the muscle. Rufus's standard outlived Rome because it wasn't about moral posturing, it was about inner alignment. Every unvarnished truth spoken chips away at the wall between who you are and who you pretend to be. And in that demolition, you'll find an unexpected reward, the unbearable lightness of having nothing left to hide. Marcus Aurelius didn't rule Rome from a palace balcony. He walked its streets, observing the chaos of humanity with what he called Stoic eyes. Picture him navigating the marketplace, merchants haggling over spoiled fruit, pickpockets weaving through crowds, a widow weeping over her husband's funeral urn. Where others saw random disorder, Marcus trained himself to see a living textbook. Everything is interwoven, he wrote, and the web is sacred. That's the essence of Stoic vision, not rose-colored optimism, but a deliberate choice to perceive events as neither good nor bad until your reasoning makes them so. Modern war reporters unknowingly mirror this practice. When journalists like Christiane Amanpour describe bombings, their cameras capture rubble while their narration focuses on survival stories. They don't deny the horror, they refuse to let it monopolize meaning. Detachment isn't indifference, it's precision. Consider the veteran war correspondent who films a shelled hospital, then pivots to interview doctors improvising treatments in the basement. The Stoic move isn't ignoring the devastation, it's widening the lens to include the resilience alongside the ruin. Psychologists call this tragic optimism, the ability to acknowledge suffering while actively seeking what still holds value. A study of conflict zone photographers revealed an unexpected pattern. Those who lasted longest in the field weren't the most emotionally numb, but those who could oscillate between immersion and analysis. They'd document a child's grief, then minutes later, focus on adjusting their aperture for optimal light. That mechanical act twisting a lens ring wasn't coldness. It was a cognitive lifeline, a way to anchor themselves in controllable details when the larger scene overwhelmed. Try this urban exercise today. Walk through your city or neighborhood with Marcus's dual perspective. Notice the frustrated barista slamming a coffee cup, then spot the regular customer who leaves an encouraging note on the napkin. Observe the graffiti on the bus stop, but also the elderly man patiently teaching his granddaughter to read the schedule. Stoic vision isn't about filtering out negativity. It's about refusing to let negativity filter out everything else. War reporter Janine Di Giovanni describes this as bearing witness without being annihilated by what you see. After covering Sarajevo's siege, she could recall not just sniper fire, but the librarian who secretly loaned books to children in the bomb shelter. The technical term is cognitive reappraisal, and neuroscience confirms its power. When researchers at Stanford showed subjects disturbing images followed by intentional reframing exercises, brain scans revealed decreased amygdala activation and heightened prefrontal cortex engagement. In plain terms, those who practiced Stoic-style perspective shifts literally changed how their brains processed adversity. Marcus anticipated this by millennia. His journal entries often dissected unpleasant encounters like a scientist examining specimens. The man who insulted you, is his behavior truly about you, or is it evidence of his own unresolved wounds? Hone this skill with the 3 frames technique. First, the microframe. Describe only observable facts. My boss's voice tightened during our meeting. Next, the macro frame. Hypothesize broader context. His investor call probably went poorly. Finally, the Stoic frame. Ask, what part of this can I engage with constructively? Maybe it's sending a concise follow-up email to clarify priorities, or scheduling a wellness check when tempers cool. The key is progressing from raw perception to purposeful response without getting trapped in emotional quicksand. Modern life bombards us with fragments, viral outrage clips, decontextualized sound bites, algorithmically amplified extremes. Stoic eyes stitch these fragments back into a coherent tapestry. The driver who cut you off isn't just an aggressor. He might be a father racing to a sick child's bedside. The cancelled flight isn't a personal affront. It's a chance to notice the kindness of strangers pooling charger cords at Gate B. This isn't naivety, it's the hardest form of realism, the kind that demands we see the world as it truly is, flawed, fractured, but still insistently alive with meaning waiting to be recognized. To view life this way isn't passive observation, it's active participation in the repair of a world we're all still learning to see clearly. Seneca's letters contain a chilling exercise, one that transforms abstract mortality into visceral urgency. You're dying every day, he wrote, not to frighten but to awaken. Imagine an hourglass turned sideways, sand pooling instead of flowing. That's how most of us treat time, as if it settles somewhere, waiting for us to get around to it. But here's the Stoic truth: each grain that drops is gone forever. The Romans knew this intimately. They placed hourglasses on generals' desks during wartime strategy sessions, a silent reminder. Indecision isn't neutral, it's depletion in disguise. Modern science quantifies this in startling terms. The average person spends 11 years staring at screens, 6 months waiting at traffic lights, and a full year scrolling social media. That's not living, it's rationing existence by default. Begin with the eulogy values draft. Take a blank page and divide it into 3 sections: what they'll say, what I hope they'll say, and the gaps. In the first, jot down the honest but mediocre epitaph you're currently earning. She answered emails promptly. The second reveals your aspirational legacy. He made broken people feel whole. The third, that's your action column. If loving parent is a goal but your current weeks are all work trips and distracted dinners, the gap screams for course correction. The power lies in specificity. Be present is vague. Device-free dinners 3 nights a week is measurable. Psychologists at the University of Kansas found that people who wrote their own hypothetical eulogies showed a 40% increase in goal-aligned actions within 6 months. Why? Because confronting the endpoint dissolves the illusions that blur our priorities. Now, conduct a legacy interview. Sit with someone who knows you deeply, partner, sibling, longtime friend, and ask 3 questions. What's one moment you think I'll want remembered? What's a strength I underuse? And what's a blind spot my future self might regret? These aren't casual inquiries, they're excavational. When novelist Toni Morrison asked her editor this, she learned her meticulous prose sometimes buried emotional resonance, an insight that reshaped her later works. The key is listening without defense. That offhand comment about you always rushing past small joys might sting, but it's also a roadmap. History's most intentional lives practiced versions of this. Beethoven kept a death notebook where he recorded musical ideas too urgent to postpone. Steve Jobs' infamous question, "If today were my last, would I do this?" It wasn't rhetorical, it was a daily audit. The Japanese practice of ikigai aligns perfectly with Stoic mortality awareness. It translates roughly as the reason you wake up in the morning. When a 102-year-old Okinawan fisherman was asked his ikigai, he grinned and said, "Catching fish for my great-granddaughter's lunch tomorrow." That's the alchemy Seneca prescribed, telescoping vast meaning into daily gestures. Here's the counterintuitive magic. Embracing finitude doesn't shrink your life, it expands its richness. That meeting you dread, viewed through the lens of mortality, it becomes a chance to practice patience or sharpen negotiation skills. The laundry folding routine transforms into meditation when you consider it's one of only a few thousand times you'll perform this mundane act before death makes even chores seem precious. Modern hospice workers report a universal phenomenon. Patients rarely reminisce about promotions or purchases, but about stolen laughter with friends, the warmth of hands held during storms, the courage it took to speak difficult truths. Tonight, try this closing ritual. Set a timer for 5 minutes and list every someday you've postponed learning guitar, visiting your birthplace, writing that letter. Then pick one and schedule it within the next 90 days. Even if just a first step, download a chord app, book a train ticket, draft 3 sentences. Mortality's gift is this: when you stop pretending you have unlimited tomorrows, today becomes astonishingly vivid. The sand is falling, yes, but your hands still get to shape the pile. You've survived every single bad day you've ever had. That's not just motivational fluff, it's mathematical fact. But let's go deeper. The Stoics didn't just count their scars, they studied them like maps of resilience. Take the story of James Stockdale, the Navy pilot who spent 7 years in a Hanoi prison camp. Tortured, starved, held in solitary confinement, he later credited his survival to one book, Epictetus's Enchiridion. While other prisoners cracked under uncertainty, Stockdale treated each day as a Stoic exam. When guards broke his ribs, he focused on controlling his breath. When they denied him letters from home, he reconstructed philosophy texts from memory. His darkest moments became his classroom. And here's the twist: after his release, he argued that those years in hell were the making of him. "I never lost the final dignity, the ability to choose how I would respond," he told reporters. Now zoom out to Seneca, exiled to Corsica by Emperor Claudius. Picture this: a philosopher-statesman ripped from Rome's marble halls, dumped on a windswept island with no library, no students, no influence. Most would have crumbled into bitterness. Instead, Seneca wrote some of his greatest works there, turning isolation into an intellectual greenhouse. His letters from exile don't rage against injustice, they dissect it with clinical precision. "What need is there to weep over parts of life?" he asked. "The whole of it calls for tears." That's the Stoic pivot, not denying pain, but using it as raw material for transcendence. But resilience isn't just for history books. Think about your own life. That layoff you thought would destroy you, you're here. The heartbreak that left you sleepless for weeks. You woke up on the other side. Even yesterday's minor disaster, the spilled coffee, the missed deadline, you navigated it. If we gathered every viewer's survival stories into one room, the collective proof would be deafening. Let's make this tangible. Try the resilience percentile calculator. 1. List 3 past struggles you've overcome, big or small. 2. For each, note 1 skill or insight it forced you to develop. 3. Now ask, would I trade those gains to erase the struggle? Most people hesitate. That breakup taught you boundaries. The failed business revealed your tolerance for risk. Even childhood bullying might have honed your emotional radar. This isn't about romanticizing suffering, it's about reclaiming agency over the narrative. Modern psychology calls this post-traumatic growth, but the Stoics framed it more starkly. Obstacles aren't detours, they're the path itself. Consider Viktor Frankl's observation in Auschwitz. Those who found meaning in suffering, whether through faith, art, or small acts of kindness, outlasted those who didn't. Or Admiral Jeremiah Denton, who blinked the word torture in Morse code during a forced propaganda video, turning his oppressor's stage into a transmission of truth. These aren't superhumans, they're practitioners of a simple but brutal equation. Pain minus meaning equals despair. Pain plus meaning equals legacy. Your bad days don't get the final say, you do. Every morning you've woken up, every night you've endured, they're proof of a contract you didn't even know you signed, the promise to keep going. Stockdale returned from prison to become a vice admiral. Seneca's exile writings outlived the empire that banished him, and your survival rate is holding steady at a flawless 100%. The next time life throws you into the fire, remember, you're not just surviving. You're being tempered. So here we stand at the end of 30 lessons, not just philosophy, but an anti-desperation toolkit forged in the fires of ancient wisdom. Picture two people facing the same storm, a sudden job loss, a betrayal, a financial freefall. The desperate mind races in frantic circles. How will I survive? This proves I'm worthless. Why does this always happen to me? The Stoic, she pauses. She separates the event from the story she tells about it. She inventories what's left in her control, her skills, her network, her ability to adapt, and begins rebuilding from there. One drowns in the waves, the other learns to swim in the undertow. This toolkit isn't about numbing yourself to life's blows. It's about retraining your reflexes so that when crisis strikes, and it will, you reach not for panic but for perspective. The Stoic questions, what can I learn here? How does this reveal my strength? What would my best self do? The desperate mind fixates on the locked door. The Stoic checks for open windows or settles in to wait with dignity until the knob turns. Think of Cato the Younger standing before the Roman Senate as his rivals jeered. He didn't shout back or crumble, he waited, and when he finally spoke, his words carried the weight of a man who'd weighed them first. I begin to speak only when I'm certain what I'll say isn't better left unsaid. That's the essence of this entire journey, mindful action over reactive flailing. Every lesson we've covered, from premeditating hardships to curating your inner circle, converges here, the choice to respond instead of react. So as you step away from this video, don't just file these ideas away. Test them. The next time your stomach knots with anxiety, ask, is this suffering real or imagined? When envy flares, mine it for clues about your own unmet potential. When anger heats your chest, treat it as a 90-second chemical surge, not a mandate. Desperation thrives in the gap between what happens and how you interpret it, but you control the bridge between those two shores. Cato didn't speak often, but when he did, empires listened. Your life may not sway nations, but it will ripple through generations, through the conversations you choose to have, the crises you meet with calm, the quiet example you set. That's the ultimate Stoic victory, not a life free from desperation, but one where desperation never gets the final word. The tools are in your hands now. The storm is coming, and for the first time, you're ready.